The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. In this webinar, attendees will learn the out-of-the-box features and functions of FCCS and gain insight into what needs to be tailored to your organization's close when moving to the cloud. It is hosted by Geordan Drummond, Product Manager at Alithya. Now that Ranzel has become a part of Alithya, stay connected with us as we continue to offer more value-added services, including enterprise resource planning, enterprise performance management, e-business suite, and business analytics. Jordan?
Thanks, Joey. So like Joey said, this is what to expect when moving from HFM to FCCS. And just to go over the agenda for today, so we'll do some brief introductions. I'll go through the out-of-the-box content that's available in the application, some calculation options, additional features that are in the application you may not have in HFM today, how we can help you, and then a little bit of time for Q&A, hopefully, if I talk fast enough. So just a little bit about Alithya. We have over 20 years in the space, over 1,000 clients, over 2,000 projects. We're an Oracle Platinum partner, Cloud Select. We have multiple Oracle ACEs, a pretty experienced delivery and management team. Many of our resources are cloud certified, and we basically service a number of industries: financial services, retail, manufacturing, healthcare, pretty much everything. Just a brief timeline. We started out in '96 as Ranzel. We were acquired by Edgewater in 2004, and then just last year we became part of the Alithya family, so we can service both ERP and EPM solutions. We have over 100 cloud projects, and here are just a few of the customers that we have worked with to date. So with that, I'll just get into it. So just to kind of level set on the application itself, the software, FCCS, that stands for Financial Consolidation Closed Cloud Service. So this is basically a consolidation product for the cloud, equivalent to HFM. It performs your typical consolidation type features like translation, eliminations, ownership calculations. In addition to that, there's some out-of-the-box content that you don't have in HFM, where HFM is just kind of like a black box. There's also custom calculations available, which many customers need. In addition to that, there are two features that are not available, that were not available on-prem unless you got separate licensing for it. Task management, which is basically workflow and automation, and supplemental data, which helps you capture lower level detail. These features are baked into FCCS and do not require additional licensing like they did on-prem. There's also a data management component. I'm sure you're familiar with FDM or FDBE. This is included as part of the software. And then on the reporting side, you have three options: financial reporting, which is the report writer, there are dashboards and infolets, and then there's also the same smart view that you're probably familiar with on the HFM side, ad hoc formulas, basically the same software, you're just pointing it to a different data source. So just to match up dimensionality between HFM and FCCS, a number of the dimensions are pretty similar, and you'll have no trouble transitioning to them. And then there are a few differences which I've highlighted below. So the ones at the top in the darker blue: scenario, year, period, view, entity, account, intercompany. Those are basically equivalent between FCCS and HFM. There might be a few minor differences, but by and large, those function the same way. And then kind of down in the lower section, the lighter blue, you have the consolidation and currency dimensions. So that's basically splitting the value dimension into two pieces. And then there are two out-of-the-box dimensions that you get: movements and data source, that you typically would have to use a custom for in HFM, and many customers have this, either a roll forward or data type dimension. And FCCS, this is out of the box, and you don't necessarily have to use a custom for that. In addition to that, you can create up to 4 customs, which you can use for true items like line of business, profit center, departments, etc. So you can basically use the customs for slicing and dicing the data that way. So just to get into the accounts, like I mentioned, there's a lot of out-of-the-box content. You're not just getting a blank slate when you're looking at the dimension. You do get several frameworks that you can build upon. You have an income statement framework. You have a balance sheet hierarchy. You basically have effectively 2 of them. There's the primary one that you use for balance sheet reporting. There's another one for cash flow. And when you actually create the application for the first time, you also get the opportunity to choose either the traditional approach or a net asset. There's also an exchange rate bucket for creating for exchange rates, and they already have the accounts for that. Then there are also historical translation accounts, and this is based upon attribute. So instead of creating all of that metadata like you would in HFM, all you have to do is assign the attribute, which you can see in the screenshot on the right. You assign it as either a historical amount override account or historical rate override. Once you've done that, it automatically creates the accounts for you. In addition to that, there's some ratios that you can add if you would like. They're optional. And then in each of these, in the dimensions, you have these seated hierarchies, and you'll see that a number of them start with FCCS underscore for the prefix. These are basically the out-of-the-box members. Now, you can customize this content. You can add children, like you can see in the screenshot. I've added 4-digit account codes underneath cash and cash equivalents. You can move these seated members, or you can change the aliases if you would like the aliases to, or the descriptions to read differently. In addition to that, there's also out-of-the-box content in the movements dimension. So like I mentioned, this is basically a roll forward dimension. It's used in conjunction with the account dimension. So there are two kind of main purposes of this dimension. There's the roll forwards aspect, so that's your opening and closing balance. Any of the activity items that you have, you can add your own. There are some seated ones too that you can use. And then there's also the FX impact, so that you can calculate that if you're doing translation. In addition to that, there's a cash flow and cash change hierarchy, and this is basically used for cash flow reporting. So this basically breaks up your movements into operating, investing, financing, like you typically do in an indirect cash flow statement, and it also handles any kind of signage changes that you have. So typically, when you're creating cash flow, you might need to flip the sign from what you're capturing in the roll forward detail. So because you have that aspect to the movement dimension, you are able to create a cash flow statement out of this. So basically, you're creating an intersection between the account data and the movement member data when you're loading it in, and you're basically cross-mapping it to those two intersections. If you have additional adjustments for non-trial balance data, you can make those. Since you have all this in the application, this gives you a lot of flexibility around reporting. You can do it in Smart View, you can do it in FR, as opposed to just getting locked into one presentation in Excel. The FX impact is automatically calculated because you're calculating FX on each of the movement members or in each of the accounts. Then you can basically net that across the balance sheet and get your change in cash. So you don't have to do a separate calculation for that. And from an elimination standpoint, because the movement dimension is tied to the balance sheet, when you perform eliminations on the balance sheet, you're also eliminating your movement members, and therefore you're performing eliminations you might need to do for cash flow purposes. So some other metadata, data source I mentioned was another out-of-the-box dimension. This is common in HFM, usually as a data type or something like that. It's out-of-the-box in FCCS, so this lets you track the origin of the data, loaded data through the FCCS managed data member, supplemental data, other data, journals, eliminations, all that gets tracked in this dimension. And you can add additional members as needed. So in terms of the calculations, there's a number of out-of-the-box calcs that are provided with the application. There's no coding required for these. So the roll forwards, opening balance, your closing balance is basically parent, so that's not even really a calc, that's just an aggregation. The balance calculation for balancing the balance sheet, this is provided, and however, if you want to write your own version, you can disable it, or you might just want to limit the scope to say, I want it to run on actual only, but not on budget. So you can disable it on budget. In addition to that, there's some optional ratios, like I mentioned, that you can add. You can see that in the screenshot there. Some things around profitability, liquidity, some typical type ratios that you might have in your application. Again, optional. You can add them if you would like. In terms of creating custom calculations that you might want to do in the system, there are a couple of options. One of them is member formulas. You can basically attach these to members, which is a little bit easier to maintain. You're not going into a large VB script file to do that like you do in HFM. These are visible from any metadata management method. So this would be in the web or in Smart View, which I'll explain a little bit later. And they use S-based syntax. This is basically consistent with other applications you may be using. If you do need to do some more complex calculation, Calc Manager is provided, and this is basically the same version that's available on-prem. There are some placeholder rules that allow you to work around out-of-the-box calculations. So before roll forwards or beginning balances, and after translation or local. So all those particular touch points where the consolidation is going to run and perform calculations, you can insert your own rules there. This is a visual development environment if you're not familiar with Calc Manager. So you can either do it in the graphical UI or you can use the S-based Calc script language. And you can leverage any experience you have on the planning and S-based side if you currently use those products. For sure, we've done that on our side as we've gone through implementations. On the translation side, there's a lot out of the box. Your income statement default is PVA, so that's your monthly average, like most people have in HFM. There is end of month for the balance sheet. And then CTA is calculated on the balance sheet out of the box. You can see the number there on the right, FCCS CTA. And you can have a choice to either put that in into the balance sheet or as part of comprehensive income. In terms of overrides, like I mentioned, when you can configure your accounts for historical or amount-based overrides. The calculations are also included to go along with that, so there's no scripting or no calculations that you have to actually write to perform that override functionality. In addition to that, like I mentioned, there is FX on the movements too, so it calculates this in a couple pieces. Both the opening impact, the change in the rates between the opening rate and the current end of month rate, and then on the movement, which is the difference between the current end of month rate and the average. So it breaks it down into two pieces for you automatically, and nothing that you have to do for that. If you do need to do custom translation, you can override the translations just by configuring some alternate methods. So you can see basically a screenshot of the UI there. You can specify a rate. You can specify a target POV if it's different from the one that you're processing. There's no need for coding for this. You don't have to write a calc script. It's just really configuring it here in the UI. So a lot easier to maintain than what you would have in HFM with VB script. Ownership methods, if you're using ownership today in HFM, this will look somewhat familiar. It looks kind of similar to what you have in HFM, but it's slightly different. For one, there's some out-of-the-box methods that are available, but you can add your own, and you can change these as you see fit. There are also validations on the method ranges to avoid overlap. So if you have two methods that both say equal 50%, it will tell you basically you need to fix that and you need to make them contiguous. Also, when you change ownership percentages for the particular entities, it will automatically determine the method, but you can also override this. So you might have a situation where you have a small stake in an affiliate, but you still need to consolidate it. So you can override for those kinds of situations. When it comes to assigning ownership, there are basically two views. There's a hierarchy, which is typically what you'd see in HFM. You'd have to pick the parent, and then you'd see the children. There's also a legal view, which reflects ultimate ownership, which is kind of nice. Another improvement over HFM is the ability to import and export a text file, especially if you want to try and feed it from another source. So typically in HFM, you have to pick a certain POV. It was very specific. You have to pick the non-value member, the non-entity, or the descendants, and you'd have to specify that POV. Here, you don't have to worry about. You just simply pick export ownership data or import to bring it back in. In addition to that, there's an automated rollover process from year to year. So you just go into December of the current year, you click on the item that's highlighted there on the right, copy ownership data to next year. It rolls it automatically. You don't have to extract the data, do a search and replace, and load it back in. So a little bit more straightforward than what you'd have to do in HFM. There are 7 out-of-the-box consolidation rules that you can leverage and deploy, or you can create your own. So again, just like the translation that we saw, there's no coding required. This is a guided UI approach. You can use some plain English descriptions. They're not really technical. So you can basically start with a copy of the out-of-the-box rule and then customize if you want to employ these. And as you can see, there's not a lot of coding here. You're just basically specifying your context, your conditions for the method, and particular POV members that you want to filter on, and then you're specifying the POV that you're actually going to use as a source or target. In addition to that, there's something else on the consolidation side that's available in the tool called autonomous consolidations. This is basically a feature where the software automatically runs consolidations if there are no other consolidations running. All you have to do is specify the POV to monitor for impacted entities, turn it on, and then it basically runs consolidations as it goes. If it sees that there are impacted entities that need to be consolidated. So moving on to another aspect of the product, there is the concept of integrated process flows. So this is the ability to create connections between different types of applications. You can see the types of connections there in the screenshot on the right, all the different cloud services. This basically makes it easier for users to navigate between tasks without leaving a specific service. So you might have planning that you're using in your organization in addition to consolidation. So you could take, let's say, a forecast form that you have in planning, you could actually embed that into FCCS. So as the user is going through the process, their monthly close process, and if the forecast form is one that they have to fill out, they don't have to go and click on a different URL or go elsewhere. They can just click on the icon for that form, and they can go straight to it. It's not really something you can do today, but this is really a nice kind of feature that's available in the cloud. In addition to that, you can really customize the interface. These are called navigation flows. So in HFM, you might have what's called task lists that you might set up for users. This goes basically beyond that because you're customizing the user interface. Again, no coding required. You're just assigning, like you can see in the screenshot, an icon for the task that you would like to use and a name for it. And then you can basically group them into groups, or you can put them on the main screen, and you can basically set this up however you would like. And it's a familiar kind of mobile or tablet style interface. So end users will take to it pretty easily. It's not something that looks that foreign to them. Task management, like I mentioned, is another feature set in FCCS that previously had to license separately with on-prem and HFM. So this allows you basically to track all the close tasks that you have in the close process, instead of just managing it via Excel or email, or we've even seen cases where people have stuff on whiteboards and they have all the tasks that need to be done for the close. There's 3 different task types. There are manual ones, there are ones that are monitoring in nature, and then there are automated ones. So you can set up your task to be any one of those 3. There are also metrics and dashboards available for tracking. So if you want to kind of see where you're standing, what's late, what's due. And then also there are work lists that are fairly comprehensive and include the full range of tasks that need to be performed. So it could be filling out data forms, it could be reviewing reports, it could be approving journals. All of that appears in one place in the work list. In addition to that, you can connect to non-EPM services using Integration Cloud Service for full automation. So you can see in the screenshot there, you could connect to eBusiness Suite, you could connect to PeopleSoft, you could connect to even third-party non-Oracle services if you would like to do that. On the maintenance side, there are some differences in terms of how you handle metadata. So there's 2 options, either the web user interface or SmartView. You don't really have to install any client. You just add an extension to SmartView that will allow you to do that. What's nice about the way this works is that the properties show up side by side with the hierarchies instead of just having a flat list or looking at properties for one member at a time. So if you think about the HFM metadata manager today, you can click on the hierarchy and you can click on one member at a time and see the properties on the right, or you can go to the list view, but that list view is not hierarchical and it's just sorted on whichever attribute name or whichever attribute you happen to select. In this case, you can basically see all the attributes in context of the hierarchy. In addition to that, you can select only the ones that you would like to see. So if you want to just focus on, let's say, intercompany assignment, you can just pick that attribute and leave the rest out of it. So it really helps you to focus on exactly what you want to update. In addition to that, if you do this on the web UI, you do have visual warnings if you happen to pick a particular combination of attributes that doesn't work. So it'll perform this validation, and it will highlight any issues in red so that you can address them before you actually refresh the database and push that metadata into the application. On the data side for maintenance, there are a couple of enhancements for both copy and clear data. So both of these relate to journals. And if you've ever used these kinds of features in HFM, you know that this handles that typically you can deal with just the base level data, But when it comes to journals, you have to handle that separately. One at FCCS, this is handled as part of the process. So if you are copying data, it copies the journals along with the base data and puts them in a read-only status so you can at least see the impact of those journals. If you're clearing data, not only does it clear the base data, but it also puts the journals in a working status. So that way you don't have the impact of the journals in that data, but you can still see that there were journals present. So that's a nice enhancement over on-prem. Another maintenance item, EPM Automate. If you need to do automation in your consolidation, this is basically a command line, a script-based utility. It works across the entire EPM stack of products. This is similar to what you would do in a task flow, but it's a lot easier to work with. So if you ever had a really long task flow and you have to change item number 5 out of 10, you basically have to walk your way back all the way to that fifth item if you want to resequence it, and then basically build back from that fifth item to the end. Here you don't have to do that because it's in a text file. You can rearrange it, and then you can basically process that as a batch process, and that way it's a lot easier to resequence things. On the journal side, by and large, the functionality is pretty similar to what you have in FCCS. There are a few additional items to consider. So first of all, you can attach supporting files as attachments when you submit a journal. Also, the journals appear in the approver's work list. So if you have somebody that's responsible for a number of different items in the close process, the journal approvals will actually show up for them, and then they can take action on them. In addition to that, there's the process history for the journal. So you can see that there on the right. You can see that it was created, posted, submitted, approved. That entire audit trail is kept there for you to see. And a lot of users have requested that. So it's a nice feature to have. So on the form side, there are these supplemental data forms that are available. So this basically allows you to collect data at a more granular level than you would have it in the dimensional model, so to speak. So the data can be numeric, it can be textual, it can be date, it can be yes, no. These summarized values can be written back to the consolidation model for validation purposes. So you see an example here. It might be investment detail that you need to collect, like for footnotes. You can get it at any level of detail that you would like, and then you can summarize that, as you can see kind of in the top portion of the main screenshot there. All of these forms can be used as part of your and added to people's work list as part of their tasks that they have to perform. So it's kind of one-stop shopping, and you have the workflow to track basically the collection process and some dashboards too to track it. On the reporting side, like I mentioned, there's several options. One nice to see all reports in one place. If you think about it with HFM, you'd have to go to Explore for your FR reports. You go someplace else for your intercompany matching, somewhere else for journals. All of that is basically in one spot here in FCCS, as you can see kind of in the screenshot there at the top with the red box. And then, like I mentioned, FR Studio. The web version is what is shipped with FCCS. So basically, it's the same user interface. If you have users that are using FR Studio today to create the reports, basically no learning curve there. You do have to understand the differences in dimensionality, but from a pure software functionality standpoint, it is the same. In addition to that, there are built-in dashboards and infolets. These you basically connect directly to the app. There's no secondary data copies like you'd have to do in some other situations historically. These are easy to configure. There's no coding required. It's just basically drag and drop, self-service for end users. And then there's a number of dashboards that are included out of the box, both that are both focused on data and focused on process. So you can leverage those, or you can build your own. In addition to that, there are infolets, which are basically a quick way to surface your values without diving into the details. So there's just a screenshot there of that on the left, just to get some quick hit numbers. So in terms of migration methodology, we typically leverage the Oracle provided migration utilities. There's one for the cloud, there's the EPM cloud migration utility. That's a screenshot at the bottom, basically for your dimensionality. There's a HFM reports migration utility, which was recently released, that helps you convert your reports. And then we've leveraged some proprietary approaches and techniques for extracting data in the required format. We know what FCCS expects. We know what HFM provides, and we can basically do that fairly quickly. And also we leverage our experience with other migrations when it comes to approaching this for somebody who's doing this for the first time. So how can we help? We can do an on-shop workshop. We can do some demonstrations. We can go through implementation requirements with you and review project scoping and phasing. And of course, on the services side, we can provide full lifecycle implementation. We can provide training and also post-go-live support. If you'd like, we can provide you with client references. And also, we work closely with Oracle Sales as you go through that process. So that's it. I'll pause for some questions.
Thanks, George.
Any questions?
Yep, thank you. A question here. How much data is typically migrated over from HFM?
Okay, so this is a good question. So typically, this is a big consideration. If you've ever migrated from another application in HFM, that was probably part of your original consideration, how much historical data to bring. And obviously, the more data that you put into the application, the more you're going to have to reconcile. And there are some similarities, like we reviewed with HFM, but the dimensional model is different. It does take time, and then over time, you end up with various one-off adjustments. Certain things that may have happened in the rules historically, so it's kind of advantageous to keep that pared down to just what you need, and then we do have some archiving strategies that we employ if you need to keep some of that historical information from HFM.
Okay, next question. I thought there was a specific dimension for product. Is that now one of the 4 customs?
Yeah, so that would be one of the 4 customs. There is not a specific product dimension, but you can create that. Not everybody's necessarily going to want to use that, but yeah, that would be one of the customs that you could use.
Okay, next question. Is the financial reporting functionality the same as FR Studio, or do you need EPRCS to replicate FR Studio?
Yeah, so FR Studio, what you're getting in FCCS is the exact same version of the web-based FR that you have on-prem in 11.124. It's the same functionality. You don't necessarily need to use EPRCS, but EPRCS does give you additional functionality that you're not necessarily going to get in FR, and it's worth checking out.
Okay. I don't see any other questions coming in, but I'll give it another moment. In the meantime, any questions can also be emailed to us at infosolutions@alithya.com, and we'll provide a response via email. A recording of this webinar will be available on our website shortly, where you may also find a number of previous webinars posted. We hope you gained insight from today's webinar. Please visit our website to learn about and register for upcoming webinars, and follow us on social media to get alerts about upcoming events, training, and webinars. One more question came in before I wrap up, Jordan. For FR, do I need a separate license in addition to FCCS?
No, you don't need an additional license. That's included just as part of the package. And just to point out, data management, same thing, where you might have to license that on-prem. That's included as well. So it's all included in the same package.
Yep, excellent. And then a question came in asking about obtaining these slides. The slides will not be emailed out. However, as I said, a recording is available on our website, probably by tomorrow. And if you'd like to email us at infosolutions@alithya.com asking for a PDF slides, you can do that, and then I'll respond by sending out a PDF of the slides. Otherwise, you can listen to the recording as well. Okay, well, thank you to our audience for joining us, and thank you to Jordan for sharing your knowledge and expertise during this presentation. This concludes today's webinar.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, Jordan.